Allen Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Coming up next on Political Soup, Crom Carmichael is back, and he's brought with him a friend, or at least I hope he's a friend, Mike Pigott from McNeely, Pigott, and Fox. Get ready. This could be a 12-rounder. It could go all the way. That's coming up next on Political Soup.
Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkapolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Talkapolis, the social media TV network for your city.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Political Soup. I'm Joe Williams, the traffic cop of this little endeavor. On my right, the well-traveled Crom Carmichael.
Joe, how you doing?
Glad to be home, I trust.
I am. I am for a few days.
Speaking of well-traveled, mighty proud to have with us today as a guest from McNeely, Pigott, and Fox, Mike Pigott. Mike, welcome into all this.
Thanks, Joe, and great to see you again, Crom.
Mike, good to see you.
We spent many hours on the air together before, and
We
so
did.
this is a pleasure.
Yeah.
I understand you've been doing a little traveling of your own.
I have. Our family just went to Columbia.
Oh, Columbia, Tennessee. Was it Mule Day already?
Yeah, that's right. Down in Murray County. So we went South American one, and it was very fun. A very interesting experience.
I can only imagine.
Right.
That had to be a great trip. All right. As most of you know, Political Soup is exactly that. We throw it out there and let these two guys go after each other. Crom, this is kind of your cup of soup, if you will. What have you put together for this week?
Well, we're going to have some international discussions because I really want to hear about what Mike thinks of what's going on in Colombia and also right next door in Venezuela. And then I think we want to kind of weave into that what's going on in Cyprus because we can learn from the experiences of others, at least I hope we can. And then after that, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about gun control and how the left has become unhinged because they aren't getting their way. And then the new senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, has declared that she has logically concluded that the minimum wage should be $22 an hour. And her logic is, if she were not a senator, it would be hilarious. But the fact that she is a senator and has used this logic to come up with this as an answer is frightening.
As we used to say in East Nashville, if a frog had real legs, but that's a whole nother story.
And then we have one more, and that is we'll have a little something on PETA. The people for the ethical treatment of animals have not been so ethical. But that's not a surprise to me, but it might be to the audience.
That's dangerous. Now, Mike, you were in Colombia. You took the family. It must have been a vacation. What did you find while you were there? There had to be something interesting that's
It was an interesting time to be there for a couple reasons. One is that Cruz just went out in Venezuela, and so there's all this reaction. There's no love lost between the Colombians and the Venezuelans, and they're very concerned about what's going to happen next. You know, the Cruz was very close to to Castro in Cuba, very close to a lot of the communist nations, provides oil to China and so on. So they're a major playing card. I think they're the largest producer of oil in the world, and they're a member of OPEC, believe it or not, the only non-Mideastern country that's in OPEC. So there's a lot of concern about Venezuela. And then we also had the new Pope announced while I was there. And surprisingly, I went and I broke the news to the people at the hotel where I was staying, and they said, well, where's he from? And I said, Argentina. And they said, oh, well, you know,
really? Because
there's no love lost, again, between Argentina and the rest of South America. So it was kind of an interesting time to be there.
Well, I'm interested as to what the Colombians think about the concerns they have with Venezuela. Are they concerned about security issues too?
I think so. You know, we went, our last stop of the trip was in a place called Tayrona, which is a national park way over near Venezuela. And almost every major vehicle, large truck or bus or anything like that, was being stopped by the police in Colombia. I imagine a few years ago it was the other way around on the Venezuelan side coming out of Colombia when they were in the drug cartel business. But they've done a good job. I'm proud of Colombia for the way they've finally stood up to the drug lords and said, we're taking our country back, and they really have. From what I can see, they've done a good job with that. But anything coming in from Venezuela, a bus, a truck, anything else, was being inspected for two things. One was cocaine, and the other was for illegal gasoline, which is apparently one of the big things of trade between Venezuela and Colombia on the kind of the black market. So it was interesting to see the reaction of the Colombians to the Venezuelans coming into the country.
Now, why don't they like that when you said that they were not excited about the Argentinian, I guess he's a cardinal, being elevated to pope, and you said they're not very impressed with that or even like it, that's interesting too.
Well, it is interesting, and I think the attitude of many South Americans is that the Argentine people are almost like a European. They carry themselves like Europeans. They don't carry themselves like South Americans. That's not my opinion, because I've been to Argentina and found them to be delightful people and can't really tell that much difference in their attitude toward us and toward other people than I can from other countries. But to them, the Argentine folks are a bit arrogant, and this Pope is of Italian heritage, and they're saying same thing as we've always had.
Interesting. Well, you know, go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry, I was going to bust in on something you said about Venezuela, and I don't want to get you off point, but you mentioned illegal gas. A lot of that crossed the lines, and it interests me because I remember at one point I had done a little research, and gas in Nashville, for example, was $3.94 a gallon, and in Europe it was nearly $8 a gallon, and on the streets of Caracas it was 9 cents a gallon.
That's a pretty good price, isn't it?
I mean, that would leave for a lot of bootleg gas to go across the border.
It would. The problem is, well, I guess the Chinese are buying that gas and others are buying that gas. We're not buying much of that gas anymore. I was there years ago with Mayor Fulton when he was mayor of Nashville, and we had a large contingent from Nashville go there, including the head of HCA and other companies. And Venezuela was a different world down there. It was the premier country of South America. Caracas was a beautiful, modern city. And then under the leadership that just passed,
Hugo Chavez?
Chavez, excuse me. I called him Cruz a while ago. Chavez was a really bad influence, very close to Castro, and took them in the wrong direction. And they've got a long way to climb back.
I know that last year I was doing some work in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and what had one point been the largest, now the second largest refinery in the Western Hemisphere was in St. Croix. It was a co-deal between Hess refineries out of Pennsylvania and the national government, Josefina they called it, the Venezuela, and they just came up and said, okay, in 30 days we're done. I mean, 2,800 people out of work. That struck me as kind of strange at a time when gas prices were rising.
That is very surprising, and it's such a volatile situation right now. If Venezuela goes the right direction for us, the Medina, I think it's Medina, is the vice president who became the acting president. They have to have an election within 30 days of the death of Chavez. And so that's around early April. So we're going to know very soon whether we're on the right track or the wrong track. They've got a fairly strong opposition candidate, but who knows? I'm sure not a pundit on Venezuelan politics.
Well, that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting. Well, let's switch gears over to Cyprus just to wrap up our part on international. And, Mike, I'd be interested to know, when I read that the government of Cyprus, and by the way, it's an island country of 1.1 million people, so it's not big. But what they did was they just said, we're going to, as of now, we're going to seize between 6% and 9% of whatever anybody has in their checking account in the banks in Cyprus because the banks are broke. And it's one thing to do that, which is terrible, but it's quite another thing for the European Union to actually endorse it. And so you had the Europeans who were actually endorsing the country, just essentially saying, your property's ours. And then they had to close the banks because apparently they hadn't considered that people might race down to the bank to get their money.
Right. And they're standing in line at the ATM.
Right. And now they can't figure out how to reopen the banks because as soon as they reopen, people are going to take their money. Mike, how does anybody come up? I'm more interested in what your opinion is of how the Europeans came to the conclusion that this was wise than the government of Cyprus, which is incredibly corrupt.
Well, my opinion is that countries like Germany that are large producing countries in the European Union are fed up with this. They're tired of Spain and Italy and Cyprus and Greece and all these countries going close to bankruptcy and expecting the rest of Europe to bail them out. And the lesson to be learned is be careful who you let into the European Union, first of all. And second of all, don't go, I mean, Cyprus apparently has bank holdings that are 23 times its gross domestic product. I mean, they're way overextended in the banking industry. The Russians are really involved because the Russians have something like $25 billion invested in Cyprus because they like to trade in the euros. A lot of the companies in that country and their billionaires, which they have many of, like to trade that way. So it's a very complicated thing involving a lot of nations, and I think they got there by just getting way, way, way ahead of where they should be.
Well, you know, what's interesting to me is that Cyprus is doing this because they've got so much debt, so many bad loans in the banks. Now, you know, this is kind of part of what we like to talk about here about knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. What do we draw from this? And frankly, what concerns me when I watch this, and it's more how the Europeans have reacted, is what happens when this country hits the $25 trillion mark in debt, which, by the way, is not that far away. It's only a few years. At what point, when things get shaky here, at what point does our government react in a similar way and perhaps say, you know what, those IRAs and those 401ks, I think I'd like to have 20% of each of those things. And that is a great concern to me because there was no moral outrage by truly state theft. And there's no other way to describe it as saying, I'm just going to take 6 to 9% of what's in your bank account and it's mine.
Well, I hope that never happens, and I hope that that's a scare tactic on your part. But I don't know that it's not. I mean, I don't know that it is, because I don't know what's going to happen. I'm very concerned also about the level of debt we have in this country. But I would hope we don't approach the solution is not what they're trying to do in Cyprus, and I don't think they're going to do it in Cyprus either.
Well, they won't get away with it because the reaction of the people surprised the politicians, which is amazing to me.
But I think it was Germany that came up with the idea, and I consider Germany to be one of the most responsible, high-producing nations in that whole bunch. So, or I think it is on paper. If you look at the statistics, they are the most productive.
Yeah.
So, for them to come up with the idea is kind of interesting.
Yes.
Is it not scary based on Europe's history that something like that would come up? All right, that's going to wrap up our first segment today. When we come back, I'd like to tell you what we're going to talk about, but with these two, I never know, so you don't want to miss it. Stay with us right here on Political Soup.
If you want to feel the wind blowing through your hair and see the great city of Nashville at the same time, check out Nashville Scooter Tours. Trekking through the downtown streets to Music Row with Nashville Scooter Tours is safe, eco-friendly, and a whole lot of fun. They use xenon electric scooters that go 55 miles on a single charge. Find out more by calling 615-290-5563 or book your reservation today at NashvilleScooterTours.com.
And welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. Joe Williams, Crom Carmichael, and our special guest, Mike Pigott. Now, gentlemen, hot topic since we started, and a frightening topic for some of us, the new push on further gun control. Hey, I'm one of those, you know, it's time that we enforce what we got, not necessarily add on, but that's one man's opinion. I got two others here, Crom.
Well, what's interesting and I find humorous is the left has approached the gun control issue with a level of sanctimony that they rarely reach. But in this case, they have just, if you have an opinion that is different than theirs, then all they do is scream at you. Listen to this. This is one reporter says, "I don't have words to describe the cowardice of Congress or the depravity of the gun lobby, which conspired to kill the assault weapons ban. I can't explain the apparent impotence of President Obama, who vowed to use whatever power the office holds to convert the tragedy of Shady Hook Elementary School into common sense, common good." And then it just goes on and on and on, as if the other side has no right to even participate in the argument. And when Senator Cruz questioned Senator Feinstein about her understanding of the Second Amendment of the Constitution, she just became indignant and then compared the Second Amendment to porn, when she said that the First Amendment doesn't protect porn. And you know what? She's right. There's nothing in the First Amendment that says it protects pictures. It does protect speech. And porn is not speech. But the right to keep and bear arms is in the Second Amendment. So please, Senator Feinstein, do study the Constitution, and do please understand that there's nothing in the First Amendment that says porn, so please don't compare the right to bear arms to pornography.
So we should be filing a bill to outlaw pornography now?
Oh, no, she's all for that. It's freedom of expression.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's her definition of freedom of expression, but it doesn't protect it.
Well, I'm going to stay away from the First Amendment and porn, first of all, with Crom, and concentrate on the gun issue. And my attitude on the gun issue is that I don't see a problem with pulling back some on the amount of ammunition you can load in a weapon. And I know some Republicans have endorsed that idea, some Democrats, a lot of Democrats have endorsed that idea. But this exchange between Cruz and Feinstein was interesting for a lot of reasons. And one of them, one reason is that it shows the diminishing of respect for one another in the U.S. Senate or in the U.S. House. You see a lot of this kind of thing. She rebuked him afterwards for lecturing her, and he did lecture her. And I thought he was a little bit condescending to her, but she's no stranger to being abrasive either. But I think that the gun issue is one thing. The way people in politics are treating one another is the bigger issue to me, and the thing that really hurts me. It used to be you could have a disagreement like that without making it personal. Now it's become very personal.
Yes, I agree, and I appreciate that. I appreciate Cruz standing up to Feinstein by essentially saying, you know, the Second Amendment does protect the right to bear arms. And here's what bothers me about Feinstein. She acts like an assault weapon. She defines an assault weapon as a military style weapon. Now, so that is, and then she expands that definition to include almost anything other than an old-timey six-shooter that you had to load a bullet in order to get the thing to fire once. And so she does not respect the Second Amendment as the Supreme Court has recently ruled that a person has the right to protect themselves. She just simply does not. And that's what Cruz was trying to draw her out on, and I think that she showed herself for what she is, and that is she does not believe that the American people have the right to keep and bear arms. It's just that simple. And she pushes this bill through her very, very liberal committee, and I say it's a very, very liberal committee because it passed out of committee, and Harry Reid wouldn't even bring it to the floor because he says it doesn't have 40 votes. So he wouldn't bring it to the floor. So here we have this immense waste of time, this immense waste of resources. In the middle of this sequester, we have better ways to spend our time to try to figure out how to handle our tiny budget of $3.5 trillion. And so you have this, but then you have the reaction of the press. And the left-wingers in the press just essentially calling everybody who disagrees with them a bunch of names. And so, Mike, I am concerned. But you know what? On the radio, I used to be called names. I used to be called all kinds of things just because of positions that I took. And I was offended by that. And I vowed at one time, I'm not going to have somebody call me a bunch of names again. I'll defend myself. And so I'm glad that those people who believe that Americans have the right to keep and bear arms are back in the face of the left. And I hope they continue to do it until both sides agree to treat each other respectfully and not say, you disarm and I'm going to keep screaming at you.
Well, I watched Cruz's exchange with Feinstein, and I felt like he was treating her like a second grader. And maybe a lot of people loved seeing that because they maybe thought she needed that on the Second Amendment. But I felt like she's a senior senator and needed to be treated with more dignity than that. The discussion, the civility in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House and between the White House and Congress could be better and needs to be better, in my opinion. Howard Baker recently spoke on this subject, saying, and he was a great statesman in that he would work with the other party and work out ways to find agreement rather than difference. But I feel like what's going on now has become too personal, and I felt like, and Feinstein, I know she's done plenty of that herself, but I thought that exchange,
she did it right back.
But she did. But I think if you watch that exchange, though, he brought that on by being condescending toward her, and I thought she deserved to hear what he thought without being treated that way.
Well, you might have agreed more with her position on the issue than with Cruz's position, but when he said the Constitution, the Second Amendment, does provide for the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and you should keep that in mind. And her response to that was what was telling. It's that don't speak to me in such a condescending way, blah, 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 blah. But then she goes on to say, the First Amendment doesn't protect porn. Okay, I agree. The First Amendment doesn't protect porn. But the Second Amendment does protect the right to keep and bear arms. And so this was the old straw man argument. I'm going to set up a straw man, claim that you believe in the straw man, and thus prove you wrong over here. And so Cruz then sat there and listened, and that was the end of the argument. But Mike, what's interesting is that she passed this thing out of committee, and Harry Reid was so disrespectful of her, he wouldn't even bring it to the floor.
Well, I saw a cartoon, I think this morning, where she's standing there talking to the media, and she's saying, Senator Reid, you're still with me, aren't you? And he was running in the distance, disappearing into the sunset.
Yeah. Now, let me say this. There will be another one of these tragedies, because they happen about every year or so. In a country of 300 million people, if you're going to say that people who are mentally ill, who are homicidal, have a constitutional right for their therapist to not even tell law enforcement that this person is dangerous, as long as that law is on the books, we are going to have more of these. The solution is absolutely not to tell the 150 million law-abiding Americans who do have guns and who are completely law-abiding that they should give up their guns, because you have truly insane people who are willing to take guns and shoot people insanely. And what I'm very disappointed about is that there's been no activity in trying to address the issue of mental illness, and every single one of these tragedies, at least in the last 10 years, has been committed by somebody who everybody agrees is mentally ill.
Well, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, good.
One note, gentlemen, you talk about civility in Congress and how it should be better. Remember, this is a group whose history includes one member in the House beating another member with a loaded cane almost to death back in the 1800s on the floor. So incivility is nothing new to this group, guys.
Well, I agree with Mike. It has reached a fever pitch, but you can't unilaterally disarm.
Right.
And our political discord has become in many ways uncivil, and so both sides are going to have to either agree mutually to treat each other with respect, or both sides should treat each other equally disrespectfully.
Yeah, maybe it's time for us to elect people who can do the last word.
I go with option A.
I'm for option A,
and that includes the Tea Partiers versus the moderate Republicans. There's a lot of disrespect going on there too.
Mike gets the last word. Speaking of last segment is coming up next. Stay with us here on Political Soup.
If you're looking to learn guitar, check out Dave Isaac's Guitar Studio on Music Row. Whether you are a beginner or hobbyist, to professional songwriter or artist, Dave offers a unique and powerful method of instruction that teaches not just the instrument, but the whole musician. Find out more at NashvilleGuitarGuru.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. Joe Williams, our special guest. Mike Pigott, my partner, Crom Carmichael. I don't know about these two guys, but I kind of got excited the other day because I heard somebody wants to make minimum wage $22 an hour, and since I'm a minimum wage kind of guy, I kind of like that idea.
This is Senator Elizabeth Warren, the new senator from Massachusetts. She gave a speech actually, and she wants to raise the minimum wage to $22 an hour, and her logic is this. I'm going to just quote her. If we started in 1960 and we said that as productivity goes up, then the minimum wage was going to go up the same. If that were the case, the minimum wage would be $22 an hour today. Now, I got to tell you, that shows a level of ignorance about economics that if she were somebody who were in Hollywood, it wouldn't trouble me. Because the Hollywood people's economics aren't very good, except when it comes to negotiating a movie contract. Then they're very good. But this is a U.S. senator who clearly doesn't understand that productivity is not going up because people are simply doing the same thing much faster. There's machinery, there's equipment, there's technology, there's all kinds of other inputs from many, many different places that make it so that same worker working at essentially the same pace that they always have can produce more. But you still had to have all that capital investment made in order to make that possible. Well, if every time somebody had a productivity gain, you simply raise people's wages, then first of all, the number of people working would be very, very small because everybody would then want more machines, and so far they haven't put a minimum wage on machines. So it just is, why go back to 1960? Why not go back to the days of Greece? In which case, the minimum wage might be $200 an hour, Joe, and you'd be so.
I'd be happy, man,
my
but
goodness.
it won't work, I don't think.
This is one where Crom's not going to get much argument out of me. I'm in a small business and believe in the laws of supply and demand. And if they want to increase the minimum wage from, what is it, 7 1/4 or something like that right now, a buck or two, I don't have that big a problem with it. But $22, I mean, give me a break. And we were talking earlier about Germany being the most productive country in Europe. Germany has no minimum wage. And the people there do very well. The per capita income is far higher than many other places in Europe. And so I think there are ways to approach this with some common sense, supply and demand thinking, but I don't even know where this lady's coming from. I just don't understand.
Well, most people who are on minimum wage are just starting out. It's their first job. And the metaphor that I like to use is you have a ladder tilted up against the wall, and you tell somebody to go climb the ladder. And they climb on the first rung, and then they climb on the second and the third. And so most people are learning how to work when they're getting paid minimum wage. And then as they become more productive, and actually I'm just talking about just learn that particular job better, then they will get paid more if they are producing as much as they're costing. And as you learn how to work, and you learn how to think about working, and you learn how other pieces of equipment might help you become more proficient, or you learn management or whatever, where you become a more valuable person in terms of your career and your work, that's how to increase how much money you make. But this is so typical of the left, is to just say, by golly, there's got to be a reason that I can come up with some number. And here's the problem. She absolutely believes it. Now, I'll guarantee you, though, in her own office, she's not paying $22 an hour.
Right.
Be interesting to see that number. Just to see.
And I seriously doubt that other Democrats in the Senate or House really believe that either. That's so ludicrous. It's not even, it's not worth discussing really because it's not going anywhere.
Well, the $9 an hour, though. I mean, we've shown on previous shows the charts of what happens, especially to black youth. That as the minimum wage has gone up, the unemployment rate for black teenagers has gone up. And so it is a serious issue in the sense that maybe $22 an hour is laughable. Maybe that is. But $9 is certainly hurtful to the kids who have the hardest time getting the first job and learning how to work so that they can become more valuable and earn more later.
To me, there's a geography factor here involved, Crom, and I know that makes it way more complicated. But if you're in the government and you get paid per diem to travel to New York, you're going to get more money per day than if you travel to Topeka. And I think that factor comes into the minimum wage discussion too. $9 in New York might not be much of anything. $7 in Topeka might be a lot.
Yeah.
And so you've got to figure that in. And I don't know how to address it that way, but I think it's been since 2009 we last raised minimum wage. Is that right?
2000 could have been 2009 when Obama first came into office.
Well, I think that was the last raise, and I can understand some discussion about raising it, but I think you need to bring a lot of other factors into play, and supply and demand is one of the ones that ought to be put first on the list rather than last.
You and I agree on that.
If the senator calls for $22 an hour and you go and you find, as we say, we'd like to see the numbers, that maybe she's not paying $22 an hour to her staff, you would think that was...
And that's even with her. That's not even her money that she's having to pay.
Well, that's good judicious use of her funds. But I mean, would you consider that maybe a little hypocritical?
Well, sure.
A little, and maybe kind of like...
Yeah, but even if she were, Joe, even if she were paying $22 an hour with taxpayer money to her own staff because she thinks that's what they ought to get, it's not her money. Yeah. It's somebody else's money. And so I don't really look at it's the this is the way that this was titled. It was Senator Absurdum, and I agree that is so laughably ignorant that somebody needs to just. I mean, it's a shame. Now, by the way, she is a very big supporter of labor unions, and as we mentioned before, a lot of labor union contracts are tied to minimum wage. So if you raise the minimum wage, labor union people automatically get a pay raise. Right. Or a lot of other union contracts say if minimum wage is raised, we get to renegotiate our wage. And so there may be more to what she's doing than just ignorance. It could be that it's very self-serving, which makes it doubly bad.
Well, I was going to say, and I guess the word hypocritical was leading me to another well-known organization that appears
Could I make a point real quickly on this issue before we move on to the next? I pointed out that I'm in a small business, and so we understand this issue. We don't pay anybody minimum wage, so I just want to make.
I knew that was. I knew that was the case when you said you didn't mind if it went up. You don't have to worry about it yourself anyway.
Well,
you're already there.
Yeah, so the McDonald's prices are going up then. Yeah.
But there is another group that appears to be. I don't want to use the term a little less than genuine. Let's just say maybe proposing one thing and doing another.
Well, this is a little article I saw actually got it from the Drudge Report, because I popped that thing up and just look at headlines. And this says that PETA, now that's the organization, it's People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They raise big bucks, millions, tens of millions of dollars a year. They pay themselves extremely well. And I've said all along, this is a fake activist organization in business of raising money so it can pay themselves a lot of money. Well, it turns out that people in Virginia have given them 1,600 cats and dogs, and they've killed 90% of them. Now, when you take cats and dogs into an animal shelter, there is a certain number who are killed, and that number is 50% on average.
Wow.
So 90%. Is more or less a policy, and for the people, for the ethical treatment of animals, to kill animals, and then still try to raise money from people who say we need to treat animals ethically is just beyond the pale. But you know what? This will not be reported in the regular media. It just happened to be something I just happened to catch because I was looking.
Well, I did see that story in the New York Post. In fact, I think they did an editorial about it. So
well, good. Well, good. I'm glad it got some. I'm glad it got a little bit of publicity.
My attitude on this is, why is PETA even going there? I mean, they get a lot of money to go out and fight for animal rights, and why would they open a dog pound or a cat pound or a cat dog pound where they're killing 90% of their animals and putting themselves at risk like that? I'm thinking as a political advisor to somebody, I would say, why do you even want to go there? Because look what they're getting themselves into. I do volunteer work for a no-kill animal shelter here in Middle Tennessee, and so I think it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done. And for them to be holding themselves out as the protector of animals and then killing 90%, which is higher than the national average, is crazy.
Well, I have a shelter pup, and I commend you for the work you do. And you adopt a pet from a shelter, and they are just generally the most loving animals. I mean, they have a great appreciation for being adopted. Absolutely.
Well, nobody expects them to be in the animal shelter business, so I don't know why they're there, and I bet they're not for very long.
They won't be for very long. They'll sit up on their perch. By the way, PETA also looks the other way on wind farms. because wind farms kill over 400,000 birds a year, including dozens of eagles, who are supposedly protected.
Well, they are right up until that blade comes around.
No. The wind farm operators go to the federal government and actually get a waiver that allows them to kill eagles with their wind propellers, but a farmer can't shoot an eagle that's right next door.
But there's a difference there. There's a difference there. If you're a wind farmer and your windmill is operating and it's going round and round, they're not necessarily seeking out that eagle. The eagle was just, or the bird, whatever it is, just flew in there. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's natural selection. There's a difference when the farmer goes out, or you or I go out and go, hey, look at there, I think I want to mount him, pow. There's a big difference.
There are very, very few businesses. In fact, I can't name another one other than wind farm operators that can go to the government and get a permit to kill animals that are on the endangered species list. I can't name another one. And that's because the wind farmers are in that protected status along with solar panels and this other green energy that all of a sudden, and by the way, the point is PETA is not in the wind business, but PETA looks the other way when it comes to the wind farmers going to get permits. And the reason is they're all in bed together.
Well,
it really isn't about what they say it's about. It's about raising a bunch of money so that they can make themselves millionaires.
Yeah, but they also get all those actresses to pose nude, you know, so
well,
that
that's
they don't wear
that
their
would
furs,
be,
you know. Now, in an effort of complete disclosure as we close this section, I guess I better go ahead and tell you that I, unfortunately, am a member of PETA, but it's not this one. I'm a member of the People Eating Tasty Animals organization, and there's nothing like There's nothing like a good steak. I'm sorry, I got to go with that one. Speaking of steak,
swinging by the wind farm tonight, right?
Yeah, that's where we're headed. Speaking of steak, nothing goes with steak like a good glass of wine. It's just a matter of where you're going to get it, because it ain't going to be at the corner store. We'll talk about that when we come back and wrap up Political Soup.
Allen Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
And welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. For those 2 nasty phone calls I got after my last admission, I'm sorry. Maybe I should change memberships in organizations. However, I do like a steak, and a good glass of wine never hurts. But gentlemen, in the state of Tennessee, unlike other places, we won't be getting it in the grocery stores, but we came close.
Oh, was that the outcome?
Well, that's the outcome as of right now. It looks like it's going to die for this year, and our company's been on the side of putting wine in grocery stores. And I know there are plenty of liquor store owners and others who have a different point of view, but we believe that it should be convenient and available, and most other states have wine in grocery stores.
When I go to Florida, I mean, the wine section in the grocery store there is large, and so what you're telling me is that what you have certain interest, the liquor store business,
right?
Because beer is in supermarkets, but wine and alcohol, not non-beer alcohol, can be only sold in liquor stores. And you're saying that that's a fairly powerful lobby here in Tennessee. And
I would say, yes.
Are there more on that side? I mean, I remember at one point you had that deal about, you had a dry county, and you had the liquor store owners in the county next to it, and the preachers who would line up to keep this county dry. So the people here had to go over here to buy liquor.
They call it the Lobbyists Retirement Act because it keeps coming back year after year, and our firm's been involved with it for several years, but. This latest version would allow a vote by the people of the county in question. If you're a dry county, you don't have to have it. If you're a county that only allows beer sales, you don't have to have it. But it would allow a vote of the people in the county as to whether or not they wanted to offer wine in grocery stores. It was beaten in kind of a surprise maneuver. Somebody switched over at the last second. It could be brought back up again, so I don't want to, sound the death knell. I hope it does come back up again. But it's an interesting issue in that it really pits some of the strongest lobbies on Capitol Hill and Nashville against each other. And And the grocery lobby is certainly, they're out there in force. The Kroger people and others are letting their voices be known. And then the citizens overwhelmingly, the survey shows citizens are overwhelmingly for putting wine in grocery stores. So it's an interesting issue in that the lobbyists are kind of in a stalemate, and yet it's a pretty popular issue otherwise.
Well, let me ask you, Mike, about another issue that's local in nature, because I heard the ads on it, and that's this thing about if you buy a ticket to a concert or a game or something that you don't own the ticket, that you can't even. I heard an ad where they're saying that there's legislation afoot or something that you can't even give your ticket to somebody, and I've only heard the ad, so I may have even misstated what I think I know, but
that's another issue we're involved in.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Good. Well, good.
It's a
hot seat.
It's a bill called the Fairness in Ticketing Act, which is being pushed by Ticketmaster, and it's the farthest thing from the Fairness in Ticketing Act in reality. And what it does is it gives Ticketmaster and its parent company and sister companies more say-so over what happens to your ticket once you buy it. And basically it says that they don't like what you're doing with it, they could take it away from you. And the American Conservative Union, the Institute for Liberty, a whole lot of groups have come out on our side of this thing saying this is a basic property rights issue and we're against this bill. And it's a very close vote in the legislature. I hope it's beaten this year.
What is the law right now? If I buy a ticket to a Titans game,
you can do whatever you want with it. You could donate it to a charity for a silent auction. You can sell it through StubHub for 5 times its value if it's like an AFC playoff game. You can give it to Joe.
Okay.
I know he's probably done that lots of times, Joe. And
I'm minimum wage. I can't buy my own.
Or you can use it yourself. And so you've got all kinds of options. Under this bill, it gives the person who issued the ticket, not the person, but the venue that issued the ticket, total control over what's done with that ticket after that. So if you buy a concert ticket at Bridgestone, Bridgestone will have say-so over what happens to it. If they don't like that you're going to sell it through StubHub, they might even make it into a paperless ticket, which is becoming more and more prevalent, where there is no ticket. You go to the show, you show your credit card you used to buy the ticket and your photo ID, and then they let you in. So it makes it almost impossible for you to transfer it.
Well, that's interesting, because wasn't there just a case before the U.S. Supreme Court on books and music or something like this, that if I buy a book and I want to resell the book, that the publisher, I think publishers were trying to make it so I couldn't resell a book that I'd paid for, and the Supreme Court ruled that once somebody's bought a book, it's their book.
Right.
And so wouldn't this, I mean...
That's a good analogy,
okay.
and that's what the issue is here. Our proponents believe that if you bought that ticket, you own that ticket, and you ought to be able to do what you want with it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, good. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about that, because I wasn't quite sure, and that does make perfect sense.
And this comes on the heels of a recent investigation by a local TV station talking about, without calling names, certain ticket organizations sell their tickets, but the really good ones you're not going to get anyway.
Well, Channel 5 recently did an investigation here in Nashville where they looked at the Justin Bieber concert, which was in January at Bridgestone Arena. There were 14,000 seats for that concert. 1,000 of them went on sale to the general public, and the other 13,000 went to Justin Bieber, his fan club, American Express, all these other organizations. And so there's a lot going on with tickets that we don't realize in the general public. There ought to be more transparency, period, about where these tickets are going.
Now then, how did those 13,000 tickets, were they then resold by those various organizations at whatever price they wanted to?
Yeah, Channel 5 found that Bieber, I doubt that Justin Bieber himself, but his organization was out scalping his tickets before they ever went on sale to anybody else. And then American Express has a deal where they can re-offer tickets or offer tickets to concerts that no one else can get their hands on. The fan clubs, people pay to get in these fan clubs, and then they get access to tickets that then they can scalp or keep themselves or whatever they want to do. But overall, it's a big scam. It really is.
Interesting. It's
the bottom line. That's also the end of our time today. Mike, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Hope we'll see you more often.
All right, thanks.
This was fun. I was expecting a 12-round grudge match, and I got Two guys just staying in the clinch too much. Crom, hope you're here for a while.
Well, I am. I'll be out of town a little bit next week, but we'll be able to do our next political soup a little sooner than the gap we had from the last one.
All right, we'll get all the ingredients ready, and I guarantee you, Crom will mix it up and stoke the fire before we're done. For Crom Carmichael and our special guest, Mike Pigott, I'm Joe Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Political Soup.